Hey everyone! In this video today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make these textured dish scrubbers. Now I didn't think that I was going to be doing a third crochet scrubby video, but I saw this pattern on the Yarnspirations website and absolutely loved it, so much that I wanted to make a video tutorial to go with the written description on the website. They even have a little string to hang them, and I also added sort of a strap along the back so that you can put it in your hand instead of just holding it like this or however. And I think these little textured pieces make it super fun. I think they add something just a little extra to a regular dish scrubby. I think these ones are a little bit of a step up from the other two easier ones that I have posted so far, but I don't think it's too difficult to learn. So if you are interested in learning how to make these, then keep on watching. So what you're going to need is your yarn, of course, and I am going to be using worsted weight medium yarn as usual. And of course, you know, I had to go with the acrylic yarn. On the website, the written instructions say to use cotton yarn, and I did almost buy cotton yarn one day, but I still haven't made the plunge yet. So for now, I am just using medium acrylic yarn. And of course, I'm going to be using my 5.25mm hook. And like I've said before, you can use 5mm, you can use 5.25, you can even use 5.5. Just make sure you check your specific yarn and you'll be fine. And of course, you will need your scissors and your yarning needle in case you need to sew in any of your tails. And that's it. So to start, of course, you want to make your slip knot. And to start off, we are going to chain 4. And what you want to do is go into the very first chain that we made and do a slip stitch. So that way we can make a ring, which will be right in there, if you can see that. And we are making a ring because we are going to be working around to start our foundation for our textured layer. So to start off our first row, you want to chain 1 and single crochet into this ring. And it's gonna look kind of funny at first, maybe, but that's okay. And because we won't be slip stitching to join, I am going to be using a stitch marker to make sure I mark the beginning of every row, just so that way I don't get lost. If you don't need a stitch marker, go ahead and leave that out, but I do recommend it if you're not too familiar with doing this stuff, just so that way you don't get lost. And after our first single crochet, we're going to slip our stitch marker in there. And then we want to do 9 more single crochets in this ring, which will add up to 10 single crochets. So here's our first single crochet, and let's go ahead and do 9 more of those. And when you get to the end, you want to count 10 single crochets. So now that we have 10 single crochets here, you can pull on your tail to close up this ring a little bit. But this hole won't matter because it'll be covered up anyway by all of our textured pieces. So for our second row, we are going to be doing 2 single crochets in every single one of these stitches. So we can take this out. One thing to note for this pattern is moving forward, we are only going to single crochet into the back loops of every stitch. So here is our first one of the second row. And before I forget, I will put my stitch marker back in. And then here is our second one. And you want to put 2 single crochets in every single one of these. 10 single crochets. And by the end, you should count 20 of them. So remember, we are going into the back loops only. Do 1 single crochet, then go back into that same spot and do the second one. And do that all the way around until you meet back up with your stitch marker. Alright, here I am back at my stitch marker. And for this next round, this is the pattern that we're going to be following. Remember, in the back loop, do 1 single crochet. Put that stitch marker in super quick. And then in the next stitch, we are going to do 2 single crochets. And then in the next stitch, do 1 single crochet. Stitch after that will be 2 single crochets. And you're going to be following that 1 2 1 2 pattern all the way around. So one more time, 1 single crochet. And then in the next one, do 2 single crochets. So follow that pattern all the way around, and at the end of this round, you should have 30 stitches. And here I am, back at the beginning. For our next round, we are going to be following a little bit of a different pattern. So in our first stitch, we are going to do 1 single crochet, put a stitch marker in really quick, and then in the next stitch, do 1 single crochet, and then in the next one, do 2 single crochets. So that is our pattern for this round, 1 1 2. So one more time, 1 single crochet, and then another single crochet in the next stitch, and then in the stitch after that, we are going to do 2 single crochets. And that is the pattern that you are going to follow all the way around until you get to the beginning, and by the end, you should have 40 single crochets. So I'm back at the beginning again, and for this round, we are going to be following another different pattern since we are still increasing. So first, we are going to do our first single crochet in the back loop, remember. Put our stitch marker in really quick, and then do another single crochet in the next one. Do 1 more single crochet, and then in the next stitch, we are going to do 2 single crochets. And that is the pattern that we will be following all the way around, 1 1 1 2. So one more time, 1 single crochet, and then another, and then one more time, and then 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So follow that pattern all the way around, and by the end, you should have 50 stitches. And once you get to the end there, you can take out your stitch marker and slip stitch into that stitch. And then you can go ahead and fasten off because you are done with your foundation layer. So here is our base for our textured layer to go onto. So you can see here that it will stretch out a little bit as you do the textured layer. And if you want to, before you fasten off, you can single crochet your little hand strap if that's what you want to make, but you can also add it at the very end. It's really up to your preference, but I'll show you guys how to do that little hand strap when we finish. So I don't really need to weave in this tail because I weaved it in pretty well. when we were going around, so I am just going to snip that off. And I will just leave this tail for now, but you can just weave it in through the back here, or you can go down, whichever way you want to do it. So I am actually going to use a different color of yarn just to make it a little bit more fun. And I really wish I had some variegated yarn because that would look really cool, but we'll just use a second color today. And this part is a little bit tricky. Not so much tricky, but it's going to be a bit more tedious to get down at first. So the way we want to attach this is just make your slip knot. And we are going to find our very first front loop, which will be in this area right here. You can kind of see, because we didn't slip stitch at the end, it just circles on and on. And these are what you're going to be following until you get to the very end. So into that first front loop there, if you can kind of see that, we're going to put our hook in. And this is going to be a little bit awkward to work into, so if you do need to fold your yarn in half like this to get into every single loop, that's totally fine, because it's naturally going to want to curl in anyway, but when you do actually use it, it'll sort of relax. So I am going to slip stitch to join. And then once we have that, for our textured layer, we'll be following the same sort of pattern throughout. So first we are going to chain 4. And then we are going to single crochet back into these 3 stitches. So not this one that our working yarn is inside of. Go into that next one, and we will be doing 3 single crochets. And then when you're done, we need to close this gap up a little bit. So go back into this front loop and slip stitch to join. And then that'll kind of hold it down. And that is our first textured piece. So I'm going to weave in some of this tail as we go along. You can do it after if you want to, just whatever you feel like doing. And find this next loop, which will probably be a little difficult the first few times. So like I said, if you need to manipulate your foundation piece a little bit, then go ahead and do so. And we are going to slip stitch into the next one. And then again, chain 4. And then go back into 3 single crochets. And then to close this huge gap up, we are going to slip stitch back into that same loop. And that is what we're going to repeat the whole way around. And it's going to take some time, but when you start getting used to the feel of the sort of awkwardness of holding this piece really weirdly, you'll eventually be able to get a pretty good groove going. If you really aren't used to this kind of feeling though, I would advise you to take breaks throughout, so that way you're not straining your hands or your wrists and even possibly injuring them. I am going to keep working all the way until we get to this little area here. So that is where I'm going to meet you, is the second to last sort of row, where I will have a little bit of explanation here. So go ahead and take your time working up this textured layer, and I will meet you guys there. So here I am, up at my very last front loop, near where we fastened off in the last row. So I'm going to finish this up really quick here. Now from my understanding, the pattern has you also go into the front loops of the very last row. But with this one, I actually didn't do that. And it stays just a little bit smaller, whereas this one is a lot bigger, even though there's just that one last extra row. So you can see the difference there just a little bit. So realistically, if you wanted to stop here, you could make your loop up here and your little strap if you wanted to. Or you can go ahead with the very last row in the front loops of all of these. And it's pretty simple to jump to that. You can see this is where we slip stitched into on our final row of our foundation. So if you do want to keep going, then go ahead and do that. And if you want to stop here, I will show you guys how to make the loop as well as the hand strap to finish this off. And you can see it definitely is curling in pretty badly, but like I said, they will flatten out and not be so curled in like that. Now before we fasten off, we want to go ahead and make our little loop so that we can hang this scrubby if we want to. And we're just going to chain 12. And you can chain more or less if you want to, but I think 12 is a pretty good number. And once you have that, you want to slip stitch back into the very last stitch that we did our textured stitch in. And if you just want this loop on your scrubby, you can go ahead and fasten off. But if you want to make the little hand strap, we are going to chain about 15. But depending on the size of your hand, you might want to do more or less. So I say work up some chains. And you can kind of hold it against the other side like this, and you can put your hand in and see if that's going to be too tight or not. And just keep testing until you find something that feels right for you. And then once you have that, just go straight across. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you can find a back loop to slip stitch into. So go ahead and do that. And then you can finally fasten off. And then just weave in all of your tails, and then you are finally finished. So the scrubby isn't too complicated to make, but it does take a little bit more time than the other two scrubbies that I have posted. But once you get the hang of it, it will become way easier to work up. And that is all I have for this video today. And if you guys haven't seen my other scrubby videos, you can go ahead and check those out and see if you like any of those and maybe want to make them. So thank you guys so much for watching this video today, and I will see you in the next one.